death, destruction, tyranny. 1,400 years after the advent of the Prophet, we see increases in war, violence, and famine all over the world. God says in the Quran, those who disbelieved are allies of one another. Unless you keep these commandments, there will be chaos on earth and terrible corruption. Only God can alleviate suffering. But what commandments did we lack to uphold that got us here in the first place? 1979. Mecca, right after the morning prayer.
On the morning of November 20, 1979, up to 500 militants attacked the Grand Mosque al-Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, Islam's holiest site. Led by a 43-year-old religious fanatic, one Juhayman al-Otaibi, the militants occupied the Grand Mosque for nearly 2 weeks, in the process shaking the Saudi regime to its core. The ensuing gun battles and attempts by Saudi security forces to retake the mosque officially cost over 255 lives, including 127 members of the security forces.
Juhayman, a man who claimed to be a prophesied figure, attempted to take over Masjid al-Haram in Mecca. His companions read a speech that read,
"Fellow Muslims, we announce today the coming of the Mahdi, who shall reign with justice and fairness on earth after it has been filled with injustice and oppression."
The Mahdi is a figure prophesied within the Hadith Corpus to bring justice on earth and protection to those in need. There are many narrations in regards to the Mahdi, but the ones that we will be looking at this episode is the prophecy that Juhayman attempted to fulfill before his eventual death. In the year 679, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, Hussein ibn Ali, decided to take a trip to Kufa. Little did he know, this trip would be his last. In Syria, news had spread that the Caliph Muawiyah had passed away. Controversy arose as to who would take his place. Previously, Muawiyah had made a deal with Hassan ibn Ali that if Muawiyah died first, the caliphate would go to Hassan. Considering Hassan died first, the deal became voided. After Muawiyah's death, his son Yazid took the throne. This enraged Hassan's brother Hussein. Yazid was short-tempered, rebellious, and angry. Hussein had received correspondence from the city of Kufa, an area dominated by Yazid's forces. He was told that he had supporters in that region, so he took the trip to visit. Little did he know, he was being set up. To the surprise of Hussein, he was betrayed. He was attacked, stabbed, and his family was mutilated by Yazid's army. It was Yazid's family that had control of the caliphate in Syria. But Mecca and Medina was up for grabs with Ali, Hassan, and Hussein gone. Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr was in Medina, but when news of this had reached him, he went straight to Mecca. Abdullah grew with power in Mecca, and the Medinans wrote to him saying it was his time to lead the opposition against Yazid. He arose amongst the people of Mecca and gave a speech about how horrid Yazid was for killing the grandson of the Prophet. He riled up the Meccans and blamed the Kufans for allowing this to happen. Abdullah's companion stood up and declared,
"Man, make public your acceptance of the oath of allegiance to you, for no one remains now that Hussein is dead who can dispute this affair with you."
It was settled. The Meccans and Medinans had chosen Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr to lead them against Yazid and his Syrian forces. As Abdullah prepared for incoming attacks, something was brewing up north. In Syria, advances were being made within Yazid's army, an incoming attack. Yazid was preparing his assault on Mecca. He understood this wasn't going to be an easy fight, so he sent out Muslim to spearhead this charge. The Meccans came out to defend themselves from the Umayyad attack. Abdullah and the Meccans were steadfast against Yazid and the Syrians. They withdrew from them, and Abdullah kept Mecca and Medina and managed to live another day. After the attempt from Yazid failed, he had passed away in Syria under unrelated circumstances. As the years passed and the war with the Umayyads continued, Abdullah spearheaded a propaganda campaign by using hadith to motivate his army to continue the fight. But he didn't do it alone. In order to motivate his side to continue the fight, Abdullah fabricated a hadith in the name of Aisha. He made himself into a prophesied figure titled the Mahdi. The hadith read,
Allah's messenger, you have done something in the state of your sleep which you never did before. Thereupon he said, Strange it is that some people of my ummah would attack the house for killing a person who would belong to the tribe of the Quraysh, and he would try to seek protection in the house, and when they would reach the plain ground, they would be sunk.
Abdullah created this hadith and said he received it from Aisha, when in reality he fabricated it for his own political gain. He claimed the Prophet predicted that a man would seek refuge in the Kaaba, similarly to how he sought refuge in the Kaaba after the death of Hussein. He claimed the Prophet said an army would go out to attack this man, same as how Yazid came out to attack Abdullah. He claimed the Prophet said the army would be metaphorically sunk, similarly to how Abdullah and his army wiped out Yazid's army. It was all fabricated, and Abdullah made himself into that awaited figure. Abdullah wasn't the only one fabricating hadith on behalf of the wife of the Prophet, but so was his companion, Ibn Safwan. He fabricated hadith on behalf of two wives of the Prophet, Hafsa and Salama. The one he fabricated from Hafsa read,
Allah's apostle said, An army would attack this house in order to fight against the inhabitants of this house, and when it would be at the plain ground, the ranks in the center of the army would be sunk, and the vanguard would call the rear flanks of the army, and they would also be sunk, and no flank would be left except some people who would go to inform them.
This hadith that Ibn Safwan fabricated on behalf of Hafsa were the battle strategies of the Umayyads. The goal of this fabrication was similar of that of Abdullah's. If they could convince the army that the Prophet truly said these things, they would be able to make themselves look like the prophesied good guys, while the Umayyads would be considered enemies of not only the people but the Prophet as well. Ibn Safwan also fabricated a hadith on behalf of Salama. It reads,
Allah's messenger had said that a seeker of refuge would seek refuge in the sacred house, and an army would be sent to him, and when it would enter a plain ground, it would be made to sink.
Similarly to the hadith that Abdullah fabricated on behalf of Aisha, this hadith was fabricated for the same intent: to give their army morale of an impending prophetic victory in a time when they were battling the Umayyads. Unfortunately, they got too carried away in their fabrications and ended up fabricating something else that was too late to change. Ibn al-Harith, a companion of Abdullah and an appointed governor of Basra, also fabricated a hadith on behalf of Salama. The problem, though, is that his fabrication would poke the hole into the idea that any of these narrations are authentic. The first half of the hadith is no different than what Abdullah and Ibn Safwan fabricated, but the second half is interesting. It reads,
Then there will arise a man of Quraysh whose maternal uncles belong to Ka'b, and they would send against them an expeditionary force which will be overcome by them, and that is the expedition of Ka'b. Disappointed will be the one who does not receive the booty of Ka'b. He will divide the property, and will govern the people by the sunnah of their prophet, and establish Islam on earth. He will remain 7 years, then die, and the Muslims will pray over him.
Al-Harith fabricated a hadith that would predict the fate of the Zubayrids after their battle with Yazid. He made the prophecy of how the Umayyads would send another force, and that leader will be related to Ka'b. They prophesied that this leader would lose significantly, and that the Mahdi will then establish Islam on earth. By fabricating this hadith, they are attributing this prophecy to the Prophet. The only problem is that the exact opposite happened. In 692, Abdul Malik sent his expeditionary forces out to Mecca. In the hadith related from Al-Harith, The Zubayrids were destined to defeat them just like they defeated Yazid's army in the past. The thing is, they utterly failed. Abdul Malik took Mecca and crucified both Abdullah and Ibn Safwan. The prophecy had failed. Abdul Malik was now the caliph of not only the Syrian territories but of Mecca, Medina, and everything in between. Regardless of the defeat, the hadith that were fabricated by Abdullah and his companions continued to spread. They were passed down until they were canonized in Sahih Muslim and Sunan Abu Dawud. The failed prophecy from Abu Dawud was graded weak. The ones from Ibn Safwan were preserved in Sahih Muslim. Nowadays, Muslims await the coming of the Mahdi. Some of them even claim to be the Mahdi themselves.
Want to reveal something that I myself is Imam Mahdi, and I am giving you the good news of the arrival.
From the man to whom that army is loyal, Muqtada el-Sadr. Fox News' Clarissa Ward takes a closer look.
The sight is somewhat familiar by now. Thousands of men marching purposefully through the streets in unison, dressed from head to toe in black and chanting repeatedly, "We are the army of Muqtada. We are the Mahdi army."
اصل انا شايف دلوقتي على التواصل الاجتماعي اللي بيتقال على حضرتك انت المهدي المنتظر، وانت صرحت قلت انا المهدي المنتظر.
قلت لك انا احد المهتدين.
انا بتكلم عن المهد المنتظر.
قال ربما اكون هو ولا اعلم.
Due to the negligence of the fabricators and hadith compilers, Muslims are now of the idea that there is an awaited one who would arrive in the end of times. God tells us what to do when we hear such accounts. We have permitted the enemies of every prophet, human and jinn devils, to inspire in each other fancy words in order to deceive. Had your Lord willed, they would not have done it. You shall disregard them and their fabrications. This is to let the minds of those who do not believe in the hereafter listen to such fabrications and accept them, and thus expose their real convictions. For 1,400 years, society had been plagued with end-time narrations. The truth of the matter is that there is no Mahdi. There is no awaited one coming to save the Muslims from their own turmoil. We listen to these narrations inspired by human and jinn devils. And now we're facing the consequences. God allowed the Zubayrids to fabricate these narrations as a test for us, to expose our true convictions. Would we adhere to a preserved book from him, or chase empty narrations meant to lead us astray? To revisit the verse from earlier, God said, "Those who disbelieved are allies of one another. Unless you keep these commandments, there will be chaos on earth and terrible corruption." Due to these narrations, wars, militia groups, and divisions have occurred all over earth. And there are many that intend on keeping onto this route for the sake of following what their forefathers were upon. When they are told, "Follow what God has revealed herein," they say, "We follow only what we found our parents doing." What if their parents did not understand and were not guided? God granted us a conscious brain to use. When the truth has been presented to you, how will you respond? That will be the end of the video. If you enjoyed, please give a like and subscribe. For updates, check out HadithCritic on Twitter and make sure to join the Submission Discord server. Research, Quran studies, and other activities are always occurring on the server. Visit QuranTalk for similar content. May peace be upon you all.